Hi everybody, it's Peter Selby from Business Drivers and another podcast from our Releasing the Business Handbrake series. And today it's my absolute pleasure to interview Lesley Williams from Major Street Publishing. So welcome, Lesley.
Thank you.
Lesley, I've known each other for a little while, but it's going to be a great interview and I'm sure a very interesting story. So Lesley, maybe just to get us going, just tell us a little bit about Lesley and what you do and your story so far.
Okay, well, thanks for the opportunity to talk to you about Major Street Publishing. So we're an independent business book publisher. So we publish books on personal finance, leadership, business, motivation, all non-fiction. And I started the business 11 years ago. I've always been a publisher. I've always been in publishing. I started my career in publishing with my father's company called Write Books in the 1990s. And we grew that company from a two-person outfit to a business that we sold to a global publishing company, Wiley, in 2001. And I went across there with the acquisition. So I'd had 10 years of small business experience in my father's company. And then I had a fantastic 7-year career with Wiley, seeing how a big global company worked. It was family run, actually, still a family business, although it was listed on the stock exchange. So I was on the global business publishing team. It was absolutely awesome, that opportunity. Prior to that, I took on another role, a CEO role on a children's publishing company, which frankly didn't go that well. And after 2 years, I decided that I would start my own business again. So that's when I started Major Street.
Brave move.
Look, it didn't seem like it was taking a huge risk at the time, because I felt like I'd done it before. And it just gave me some control back, I think. So it didn't seem like a big risk at the time. But then a couple of years later, half the bookstores closed. So if you remember the Borders chain and Angus and Robertson book chain, they closed. So that was a bit daunting.
What was the driver for that? What happened in the industry?
Well, what happened was there were too many bookstores, basically. So there was the Dimmock's chain, there was the Angus and Robertson chain, and the Borders chain came in from the US. Borders didn't work in Australia, and Angus and Robertson were floundering. So a private equity company came in and bought both of them, and basically ran them into the ground.
So that's interesting. I mean, Borders is obviously very successful in the States, and it's pretty successful in the UK as well. Why do you think they failed in Australia?
I don't know how successful it is in the US. Their business model was to have like 2 copies of everything in the bookstore. So they had huge stock holdings, absolutely huge, and not very fast turnover for a lot of their titles that weren't so popular. And I just think we had too many bookstores. We have great independents. We sell a lot of books in the DDSs. We've got Dimmock's, Collins. There were just too many bookstores, frankly.
Right. So if you think back to you leave your education, what got you into book publishing? Why choose that career?
Well, my dad was always in publishing, so we were brought up around books. I always loved reading. Business books were just not my bag, though, at all. I did arts at university. I actually did my degree is in Italian and European literature, so it couldn't be much further away from business books, I have to say. But I got my first job as an editor, and the reason I remember the interview, why would I be a good editor? Because they were training me, and I said that the detail that you need when you're working in languages, because I did, as well as Italian, I did German, French and Latin. So the detail that you need, the detail that you need when you're writing into a different language is the detail that you need to edit a book. Anyway, I got the job and they trained me, and that was it.
Wow, that's an impressive portfolio of languages. Wow, you've obviously got a talent for communication, that is for sure. So Lesley, you've obviously had a deep career in publishing, and then you took the big plunge 11 years ago and started Major Street Publishing. So maybe tell us a bit more about your organisation that you've formed over that time.
Okay. Well, publishing's quite an easy business to start on your own because even the bigger publishers use a lot of freelancers.
Right.
So it was the task was to put together a loyal team of good freelancers, and I had contacts from my days when I worked for Wiley and before that. So teamed up with a designer who's still with me. That was 11 years ago. She's awesome. Cover designers, I sort of been through a few over 10 years because you like to keep those fresh, but I've worked with some very talented cover designers, and editors that I'd worked with at Wiley. A lot of them were freelancing, so I got back in touch with them. I had connection with the printers. My sales and distribution was the biggest problem because we had to use companies that dealt with a lot of smaller publishers. So that was kind of a bit of a problem. And I'm allowed to talk about the problems as well, aren't I, Peter?
Yeah, absolutely.
And the biggest problem was cash flow because they paid you on 90 days and they always paid you late as well. So that was kind of a problem. But just this year, we're actually now represented by Hachette, which are one of the top 5 global publishing companies. So we go through their sales team and their distribution. So that's just turned everything around.
Right.
Brilliant timing as well this year. Had we been with our previous distributor, I think we'd be really struggling with the bookshop closures through COVID.
Yeah, okay. So the business now is obviously, you've got some great authors on board, and, maybe tell us more about that, how you've built that up, because it's, it's got a fantastic reputation behind it, and that hasn't
thank you.
without effort, has it,
No, I think that goes back to working with my dad. He was a very old school publisher, and he always said to me, Lesley, the biggest asset in your business is your authors, and I 100% agree. So whereas a small company, we can't compete, or couldn't compete when we were starting out with the bigger publishers. Right. What we could do is we could have exceptional author management. So we never wanted them to feel that they were part of a sausage factory, that their book was, a May new release. So that's it. We talk to you up until May, and then that's it. We wanted to really work on those author relationships, particularly in the communication, so that they'd come back to us, and all the time and effort we invested in publishing their first book really paid off when they come back and do a second book and sometimes a third book.
Right, right.
Yeah.
And so your business is specialising in business books.
Yep.
And assumably the authors that come here are not just selling books; they're running businesses.
Yeah, absolutely.
Writing business books. So how do you help them? I mean, they must be very busy people.
They are very busy people, and the first thing that we do is that we realise that they're not just buying the book because they want to have retire on the royalty income stream, because that's just not possible in a market like Australia, which is quite small. But they're writing the book to promote themselves as thought leaders, experts in their areas, and also to grow their business, basically, because once you put a book out there on bookshelves and people read it, the chances are they'll get back in touch with the author. And we've done a bit of research with this amongst our authors, and every author that I approached to discuss this and to get a sort of testimonial from admitted that the book had really helped them grow their business. And interestingly, it said that the leads that it brought into the business were, the majority of them were people who were very much aligned to their business. So they weren't sort of tire kickers or people they didn't want to deal with. They were people, they'd read the book, they'd got to know the author a bit. They thought, right, I really want to work with this person. And they've contacted them for financial planning services or coaching services or leadership, leadership. Yeah, so we've kind of proved that over the years that really works.
So maybe you can talk a little bit about how you help that process, because I just imagine, I'm in the professional services business too, and I'm flat chap, and how could I possibly, people listening to this will be thinking, I'd love to write a book, but how could I possibly ever have the time? So I know that you guys really specialize in helping people with very little time to do these things. So maybe talk a little bit about that, because it's quite unusual what you do.
Well, we'll start talking to an author before they've written a word, right? If they're starting with a blank page, that they need to have something to say, and we need to be able to come up with original angle on it, because there are a lot of business books out there. So, and if we're going to take a book to market, it has to be something that we think people will be interested in reading. But usually we can come up with an angle for the author.
So you work with the author to assist them to do that?
Absolutely, yeah. We'll have a conversation. I'll get to know them, find out what their business does, whether how they can sort of pitch that in book form to write something that will be interesting to readers. But we help them with that. So we sort of have no obligation conversations with authors right up front. I mean, some authors come to us already with a couple of sample chapters and an idea of what they want to write, so we can work on that with them. Some authors come to us with a complete manuscript, but many sort of think, like, I just want to write a book. How do I go about this? So if we do start with the blank page, then we have to we work out the structure of the book, what they're going to write about, sort of think about the angle, who they're writing for. And then some of them can go away and write, many of them can go away and write that themselves. And some of them like to be put in touch with a ghostwriter, so we can help either way. Even if you're working with a ghostwriter, there's quite a lot of time involved. You have to read proofs and provide them with some content. But many of our authors have got content because they've written blogs, they've written articles, they've written presentations or keynotes. So working with a writer, they'll be able to sort of pull all that content together into book form.
So
and
maybe,
we hold
maybe
their
explain just the term ghostwriter. What is that?
Okay, so originally a ghostwriter would go away and write the whole thing for you. But we use the term a bit more loosely. All our writers will need something from you, some sort of content, but they will basically take your words and write it into a meaningful book.
So they sort of interview your authors, do they? And
yeah.
Right.
So you'll work on the contents list, which is the sort of the 10 chapters, which are your areas of expertise that you're going to cover in the book. And then you might work with the writer to work out the subheadings, and then they kind of go away and fill in the gaps. And then they come back and interview you for the bits that they can't write themselves.
So that's fantastic. So you've got somebody who's crazily short on time trying to run a business, but would like to grow the business and, I guess, be an authority in their field. And here you have this start from scratch, help you compile your ideas into a book, help you write the book, and then presumably there's a publishing service at the end of it.
Yeah, so the writing the books, sometimes I say to authors, that's actually the easy bit. The production, that's easy because we do all that. That's fine. We do the editing and the design, and you have to check your proofs and things like that to make sure you're happy with it. And it's a very consultative process, as far as the cover design and the internal design and everything goes. But then we always advise our authors to work with a publicist. We have a go-to publicist that we can arrange them to do publicity for you, because there's no point writing a fantastic book and nobody knows about it. We can put a couple of thousand copies out into bookstores, but if no one buys it, they all come back. In our industry, if bookstores don't sell books, they return them for a credit. They take no risk at all. So the way to sell the books through is to have some publicity around it. And that publicity as well, our authors can share on their social media with their clients. There's nothing more, nothing better than being able to say, as interviewed by the Financial Review or as seen on Channel 9. That really helps you build your profile as an author, but also it grows your business. So so publicity is a key part. And in the background as well, we would always suggest that the authors are working away at their own social media. We can help them with that too, but trying to get a presence on LinkedIn, because it all works together to make your book the biggest success that it can be.
So with a publicist, maybe give some examples of what a publicist does. Where do they publicize the book? What sort of?
Okay. So the publicist, he comes up with a plan that we share with the author. So he looks at what they call long lead media. So he'll send advanced reading copies out to magazines that work 3 or 4 months in advance. So the places that we would normally get reviews or excerpts published in would be Money Magazine for the personal finance. We do a lot of work with CanStar, who have a regular newsletter out to personal finance readers. Right. In the leadership field, thought leadership field, we'd get authors in magazines like In the Black, which is a CPA's magazine,